Hello, everyone. I spoke with the President last Thursday and the Speaker this morning, and we've agreed to put together at the staff level a group to begin discussing the possibility of reaching a two-year caps deal so we can move ahead, hopefully, with some kind of regular appropriations process. I think there's a bipartisan desire to avoid a CR and obviously to avoid a sequester. So I'm hoping that this will be the beginning of a bipartisan agreement, which will be necessary in order to have an orderly appropriations process, not only this year, but next year as well.
Well, April 15th is just around the corner, and so it's a good time to reflect a little bit on the passage of tax reform in 2017 and how that's impacted the pocketbooks of a lot of American families. The Liberal Tax Policy Center says that 90% of Americans are going to get a tax cut. And if you look at the average family in this country with an income, median family income of $76,000, they'll see a tax cut of about $2,100. And then you look at what's happened in the economy as a result of the passage of tax reform. The month of March, there were 196,000 jobs created. There have been 3.2 million jobs created since the passage of tax reform, and 5.5 million jobs created since President Trump took office. Lowest unemployment rate since 1969. These are all good numbers for American families, for hardworking Americans who deserve to keep more of what they earn to be able to spend it on their priorities rather than sending it to Washington, D.C. and having it spent here. The Democrats, of course, are always looking for ways to undo a lot of that progress, and you look at their proposals is to spend more money here in Washington, D.C., take more tax dollars from the American people, and make it harder for average working families in this country to make ends meet. We look forward to continue to work on policies that are good, that create the conditions that are favorable to continued economic growth, higher wages, lower unemployment, and a better standard of living for the American people.
Tomorrow, Bernie Sanders is scheduled to introduce his Medicare for All proposal, and it looks like just about every Democrat senator who is running for president is going to be signing on with him, which means that their first priority is to tell 180 million Americans who get their insurance through work that they're going to lose that insurance. Remember when President Obama famously said, if you like your coverage, you can keep your coverage. Now it seems to be, if you like your coverage too bad, you're going to lose it under Medicare for All. And a great majority of people who do have insurance through work like the insurance coverage that they have. So people say, I don't know what Medicare for All is about. Well, as a doctor, I can tell you. It means longer lines and waiting times to get to see a doctor. It means higher taxes. It means fewer choices, less freedom. In terms of the expense, the last time Bernie Sanders introduced this, a nonpartisan group said the cost was going to be over $32 trillion. $32 trillion. This is not the solution for health care in America. Republicans know how important it is to make sure people with pre-existing conditions can have insurance, continue to be covered. We also know how important it is to protect our seniors who their whole lives have paid into Medicare, so they can be now at a point where they're on Medicare and receive the benefits related to those that they paid for and that they've earned. What we need to do for health care is to lower the cost of care, lower the cost of drugs, not have a complete government takeover of health care in America.
So last year, by having a number we agreed to appropriate to on both the defense side of the budget and the non-defense discretionary side, with that number, we've got 75% of all the government funded before the beginning of the fiscal year for the first time in 2 decades. If you ask anybody coming before the Appropriations Committee now that was in that 75%, what that meant to them, it meant they could spend the money a whole lot more effectively if they had it from day one or before day one, rather than get it sometime in the middle of the year. The lesson should have been, I think, what we did for 75% of the government last year to figure out how to do it for 100% of the government this year. For that to work, we have to have an agreement on how much money to spend. The president wants the biggest defense spending number ever. I agree with that. But if you're going to give the Defense Department that number, I guarantee it'll be spent more effectively if they have it before September 30th than sometime in the middle of the appropriating year. We need to get that decided, and certainly I hope we can come up with that determination and get that done soon.
Thank you, everyone. I am going to go back and just remind everybody that there are still a number of communities in Iowa and across the Midwest that remain underwater with our flooding. Communities like Hamburg, Iowa, where the water has yet to recede. And unfortunately, we do have another storm system that is coming through the Midwest. Will hit Nebraska, continue on into Iowa, and we expect heavy rains up and down now the eastern side of our state along the Mississippi River. So our communities are preparing for additional flooding over there. Of great concern to us is that a number of our farmers are still hurting. Their bills continue to increase, and yet they're not able to do anything productive with their land. There are a number of grain bins where we had stored grain, and that grain is now spoiling. That grain is not covered by any sort of insurance protections. So Senator Grassley and I are working on a provision we hope to have included in the disaster supplemental package that would cover the destroyed grain through a USDA disaster program. So we continue to work on that for the folks across the Midwest. We certainly would love to see a supplemental package passed. We don't want to see this as a political football. So I'm encouraging my friends across the aisle, step up, please. We need this aid. The folks down south that were hit last year in the disasters, they need the aid. So I would just ask them to step forward, help us out a little bit. Let's move forward. Let's make sure we're doing the right thing for all these folks that have suffered from these disasters. Thank you.
Well, with another positive jobs report coming out Friday and tax day right around the corner, I think it's fitting that we reflect on all the good that has occurred on account of tax reform and some of the pro-growth policies that Republicans have been able to advance. Since passage of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we've seen the creation of 3.2 million new jobs. But that's a big number. Let me distill that into the personal experience of one Hoosier lady. Chelsea Hatfield, she's a single mother of three, a bank teller in Tipton, Indiana. And on account of this tax reform package, her company was able to give her an increase in wages and a bonus. And what's she going to do with that money? Well, she's finishing up her associate's degree, and she's saving up for her children's futures so she can pay for their college education. I see this story replicated all around the state of Indiana, and I know it's occurring all around the country. This is why we passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. This is why we'll continue to talk about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and how Republican policies have benefited the American people.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. You always say that the Senate is in the personnel business, but when it comes to President Trump, he seems to be burning through people here. I mean, isn't part of the problem here not just the Senate confirming people, but getting the administration to pick the right people and stick with them?
Well, of course, who he sends up is his decision, not ours. We have our hands full with what was backed up on the executive calendar, and as you can see, we're now able to process nominees that are largely without controversy in pretty rapid fire order. And we will get a new cabinet member, the Secretary of Interior confirmed this week, and we'll take the nominations as they come.
But do you see this as a problem with him burning through so many people, especially in the past couple of days?
Look, I've got enough personnel work to do here in the Senate without giving him advice about who to send us. Yeah.
Some of your colleagues have expressed concern about what's happened at DHS over the last couple of days. Do you share that concern?
Look, I think the president is legitimately concerned about the crisis at the border. We know that we have not handled immigration well. I would remind everyone, when our Democratic friends had total control of the government in 2009 and 2010, they didn't bring up immigration. Yeah, we got a problem. The only way to fix it is to finally put aside some of our differences and try to focus on it. And I think, personnel is a part of the problem, but failure to act legislatively, failure to secure the border, failure to deal with the crisis that we obviously have at the border is all part of it. Yeah, it's a big problem. Yeah. Well, we're going to look at whoever the president sends up. It's his choice to decide, and once he makes a nomination, we'll take a look at it.
The Save the Internet Act, I'm guessing that it will more than likely pass the House. Where does it stand as far as the Senate is concerned?
On what?
The Save the Internet Act, net neutrality bill?
Net neutrality? Dead on arrival in the Senate.
Attorney General Barr said today that he'd be sending a redacted version of the Mueller report to the Hill. Are you happy with the idea of a redacted version? Democrats have called for all of the information from the Mueller report to be released.
Yeah, here's the problem. Do we really think it's fair to put out classified information or to throw innocent people under the bus? I trust the Attorney General to give us all of the information that we need without revealing classified information or putting out the names of people whose reputations could be ruined who did nothing wrong. So I think it really gets down to a question whether you trust Bill Barr or not. And I do, and I think he will get us a report that is as open as possible, as soon as possible. Thank you.